Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. Dogboat333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4. New Order. The Ruin as the United Kingdom. Now, last time we opted in as the UK, well, we realized that people were probably trying to overthrow us. We don't exactly like that. So, we're gonna try and make sure that doesn't happen, I guess. So right now we are fighting shadows. Okay, buddy, Dogboat, true. Got the music to jam out too. Alright, well, let's get back into it. I'm gonna be quite honest. I think he's a lot of bollocks. It's too convenient of a scapegoat to blame everything on. Hannah and our friends often met on nights like this. They would all... Oh, it's female. Hannah and her friends often met on nights like this. They would wait until they finished their respective jobs before creeping out of their houses and meeting up for a smoke and a quick natter. More often than not, their discussions turned to the various political discussions that dominated the day. On this evening, discussion had turned to the identity of the ever-elusive man behind the resistance. The boss. The discussion today had started over a recent failed police raid of the docks only minutes away from Hannah's house. The raid, according to Gloria's husband, who worked at the docks, aimed to arrest a leader of the left resistance operating in the city. She had remembered the outraged shouting of the women as they had arrived. Yet as jackboots rolled in, the operation went horrifically wrong. Details were scarce, but supposedly 5 policemen were dead in the left resistance. Oh, there we go. The left resistance members escaped without a single man dead or captured. And so, just as it had time and time again, the local government was left embarrassed, and people left to wonder once again how the resistance, thought dead after 56, was still able to survive after 20 years of persecution. No, it would be 20 years. I was thinking 56. That's been 6 years, but I know what they mean now. You know, things really do seem to be reaching a boiling point, Gloria said excitedly. I can't wait to see how things will end up. You know, we can't miss this like our fathers did. Anna paused before replying. She knew Gloria's father had been a conservative before the war, as Gloria was now, and yet she was supporting men she would see as radicals in more peaceful times. She wondered silently, could this kind of unity hold out in peace, as it had in this time of troubles? Sometimes anonymity has its advantages. Chancellor of the Exchequer was hardly an enviable position, even in this time of prosperity. Yet Richard Austin, Rab Butler, was neither foolish nor unpopular, if he did say so himself. Saddled with a state scarred by war, wherein corruption was commonplace, he had kept the economy steady and helped rebuild Britain from the destitution of the 40s. Yet, despite all of his achievements, every so often, Butler couldn't help but look back with fondness to the 30s, when he worked for an independent free Britain. He'd been a young minister then, yet there were perhaps the only times in his career that he felt free without regret. But then came Hitler, and it all had come crashing down. Butler did not consider himself a coward, nor any of his contemporaries in the Foreign Office in the 30s. While men like Churchill baited for war, men like Chamberlain fought for peace. Butler had not fought in the Great War, but he had seen the effect it had on the British people. Entire towns been decimated, their male population wiped out in a single afternoon. For that reason, he had sided with Chamberlain and fought to keep the boys safe this time. But it was all for naught. War came, and the graves of England were filled once again. Chamberlain and all the others were gone now too, either dead or having fled across the Atlantic, more than likely cursing him as a coward and traitor nightly. He was alone now, surrounded by sycophants, fascists, and fools, left to somehow rebuild a broken isle. More than once he had considered getting on a ship and leaving this godforsaken isle, to leave the fascists to collapse under the weight of their own competence. But it was a fool's dream. He had made his bed now, built upon the corpses of the innocent. All he could do now was make this new Britain as free as prosperous as the Germans would allow. Nowadays, there seems no reason to cry. Damn, okay. Do. HMLR update coming soon. Funny. Very funny, TNO. Let's work on defining an enemy. What exactly is HMLR? It's a question that MI5 have been puzzling over for the past 5 years, and one that is seemingly no closer to being answered. While the official line from our government is that they are bloodthirsty Bolsheviks tied to the trade unions, and in many cases, it appears to be true, it's not entirely the full story. Many resistance fighters are clearly members of the old government with ties to the exiles fighting against our king for the pretender Elizabeth, which would suggest that they are not all communist in allegiance. Although far more worrying theory has gained traction in our government, although not in MI5, we fully disagree with it. Many believe that the resistance is in fact a tool in the hands of high-ranking members of the government who seek to use it to increase their personal power, a dagger which they could plunge into our backs at any time. Imagine if that was true. That's some goofy stuff right there. Unless it actually is true. Who knows? Assassin strikes at Hitler. Who would have thunk it? Of all the myriad social events and activities, Gerald Wallop, the 9th Earl of Portsmouth, frequently attended, the King's evening reception at Buckingham Palace was by far the most important and most enjoyable. Surrounded by righteous men of the peerage, esteemed knights and dames, and of course His Majesty himself, it truly was perfection. Nothing like the weeping ruin that was Parliament these days. Stuffed with money-hungry German stooges, thuggish louts, and lying socialists. It had fallen so very far from the initial days of glory when he'd stood by Bedford's side as the VPP swept power. Now only a handful remain true to the vision they set out with in '45, and their numbers dwindle daily. Plucking a glass of champagne from a roving waiter, Wallop deftly navigated through the packed ballrooms, exchanging smiles and quick conversations with old friends while pretending not to notice his enemies, especially the ever-arrogant Germans and that infernal Wessenmeyer. Why the king even invited them in the first place was beyond him. Soon, one of Bedford's ministers, awarded a barony for his services, approached Lord Portsmouth. Wallop's initial enjoyment of her discourse started to sour, however, as it became quickly clear the ex-minister was approaching him not as an independent player in the game of British politics, but merely as a leading representative of the old guard. One excuse later, and Wallop was free of the man, sighing in relief. While he was a firm supporter of Domville's, and agreed with the old guard in many places, he despised that his own ideas and ambitions were being crushed under the monolithic weight of British fascism. Quite how he could escape from under it, however, remained unanswered, to say nothing of reaching Downing Street in the first place. At that moment, however, His Majesty King Edward VIII entered the ballroom, and all gloomy thoughts and politics vanished in an instant. England is but the king's men, the king's land, and the king's coin. Got quite a lot of these. Barry Domville sighed as he leant down on the chair at the head of the briefing room table. Opposite him, Maxwell Knight stood, silently staring down the table. With Domville seated, the remainder of the cabinet sat down almost at once, their faces blank, as they all seated. Wessenmeyer stared down the table from beside Domville, and carefully composed... Besides Domville, his carefully composed face revealing nothing but a slight aura of distaste, and with that, Knight began. Gentlemen, it is no secret that, to all of you, that Her Majesty's Most Loyal Resistance, or as they are commonly known, HMLR, is the largest known internal threat to our government. Following the Prime Minister's orders for me to expand our understanding of them and their weaknesses, not towards Domville, I have handed this task to my most capable subordinate, Mr. Kim Philby, who will be briefing us today. Mr. Philby? Philby stood his feet. Thank you, sir. Now I'll be honest. The Resistance run a tight ship. I've been unable to find much that we do not already know. Nonetheless, I shall lay out the facts that we have established. They are a loose alliance between the left resistance led by Jack Jones and the Special Operations Executive under Fitzroy McLean. There are two things uniting these incredibly diverse groups. The first is a figure who we only know as the Boss. The second is their desire for a free Britain. That's all we know at this point. That's all we know about them on a broader scale. We have more information on a local scale, but nationally that's it. Yes, Philip, I raised my eyebrow at that too. What do you mean more on the local scale? Vesemir asked, leaning forward in his chair, raising his eyebrow in interest. We are currently looking into some of their cells in Essex, but nothing is for certain at the moment. Philby replied. Vesemir looked dissatisfied, shaking his head. I expect you to detain and execute these insurgents soon. And quickly, too. Wasn't Philby the British guy who was a communist spy? Wasn't that him? Because I know he was in, like, the British, old British content. For the commies. Walking into 10 Downing Street, and you will hear the shuffling of feet in the carpet, the vigorous shuffling of papers, the rhythmic clacking of typewriter keys. Clocks in every room tick as civil servants focus their attention on their work. Radios are tuned primarily to the home service for the bureaucrats' edification, save for one tuned into the third network in the break room, where tea is poured, biscuits are retrieved, and bureaucrats gather around for lunch. The garden is a popular place for quiet reflections in which private secretaries take a break or a long lunch, seated on its benches and admiring the delicate garden work. Special advisors meet in strong rooms to discuss business of the day. Their conversations are sometimes sober and sometimes productive. What you will also see is a cat. Peter III, a black cat which skulked these halls, held an esteemed title, Chief Mouser to the Cabinet Office. Though relatively recent tradition, the office of Chief Mouser has brought much joy to the bureaucrats and civil service who work in this hallowed hall. His formal responsibility is the protection of 10 Downing Street against rodents and other pests. Informally, however, it exists so that the harried and overworked staff of 10 Downing Street can have a cuddly little creature to comfort them. But it's been impossible to ignore how old Peter III has become. He has served dutifully in this post since 1947, when he was just a kitten, and in 1962, his efforts have noticeably slowed. He labors to jump on desks that a younger Peter would have exerted little effort towards. He sleeps longer in trays of staff, and must be pried off the morning copy of the Times. He eats less liver than his once prodigious appetite for liver might allow. Nevertheless, Peter III remains a solid companion for Downing Street civil servants. Until the last days, he shall bring comfort and joy into their lives. There is so little joy in 10 Downing Street, but Peter III does his best. This is already the best character in all of TNO. Fuck the Philip Hart path. Fuck those two British lesbians. Fuck the Spear Gang of Four story. Fuck all that. This is the best character already. I'm just saying, Peter III Path 1. Cat moment indeed. Let's do the Lord's approval. After our German brothers liberated Britain from demagoguery and finance in the World War, one of their first actions was the repeal of a 1911 Parliament Act which returned to the House of Lords their ancient rights. A veto over any and all legislation passed by the Commons. This meant that the Freedom and Security Act will require the approval of the Lords in order to pass. Fortunately, the House of Lords is by far the most reasonable and loyal body of government in the United Kingdom. The Old Guard are still dominant there, and pragmatists and ideologues alike are pushed to the fringes. As such, it is highly unlikely that they will have any issue with the act. However, in order to make certain of this, the Prime Minister will meet with his old friend Lord Portsmouth, a devout supporter of the old government and the de facto leader of the Old Guards in the House of Lords. With his backing, the act will certainly pass through the Lords. Well, let's see, huh? I don't know how I feel about... I think we were talking about this last time, about Harold Wilson being a collaborator. I don't know. Whenever Andrew Fontaine stood to speak in the House of Commons, everyone had something to say. Whether it was a war of disdain or a cry of adoration, the man's presence was simply too encompassing to ignore. He knew this and encouraged this. Of course, he was an ideologue in the pure sense of the word, and such intense emotion was what he needed to succeed. Today he was to deliver a speech condemning the resistance and to encourage the party to come together. As if the old guard were practically irrelevant and the pragmatists would do everything they could to weaken the nation from within. As he stood, his supporters cheered, soaking in the adulation. For a moment, Fontaine cleared his throat. Mr. Speaker, with the recent lull in resistance activity, it would perhaps be easy to rest upon our laurels. To allow the fire within ourselves to die down, so to speak, this cannot be allowed to happen. I would remind the House that our enemies are many, and they suffuse every aspect of our society. If we wish for the fascist revolution to survive and continue, then we must act. A series of jeers and hollers came from the pragmatists. Good. He continued. Now, while the enemy without is very nearly stamped out for good, I would advise all of those good and true members of his house to keep constant vigilance for the enemy within, for they are among the most insidious of our foes. More jeers from pragmatists were drowned out by his own supporters. Of course, neither side knew that the resistance was nowhere near entirely scattered yet, but they did not need to. As long as they took his words to heart and did not question them, he was satisfied. Britain was on the precipice of a new age, and Andrew Fontaine would be at the head of it. Is this a black shirt rally or a government building? That's what I'm wondering. Oh, bald man. Economy, let's see what we got. I think inflation isn't the best, but what are you gonna do? Oh, we're getting more of a surplus at least. We'll use that to expand our services more. And are we getting in closer to lowering our poverty? Minimum wage. It looks like we're losing a little bit naturally. No, wait, we aren't. Never mind. I realize now. I just want a little something to reduce the poverty, you know? Is there anything I can even do to reduce poverty? Social. Oh, I didn't realize this was. Look at that. Largest trade partner is Ukraine. Go figure. Oh, this is where the trade tab is. Okay. Yeah, we're importing all of our oil. Good to know. I can't believe I actually haven't looked at any of these tabs before. What do these... Okay, so these help with healthcare, pensions, shit like that. Keep working towards that. So I don't know how to econ and TNO. I don't really either. I might just be doing nonsense, honestly, but I'm trying a little bit. Sometimes that's all you need. Alright, anyway. Of course, I'll make sure you have the votes you needed. Domville felt the crushing weight of the world lift off his shoulders for a brief moment as Gerald Wallop, 5th Earl of Portsmouth and the BPP's leader in the House of Lords, spoke, dispelling the cloud of worry and doubt that had plagued the Prime Minister since morning. Ah, good, that's excellent. Thank you, Gerald. This act will be the key to ensuring our safety. I'm sure of it, said Domville, his old friend nodding agreement from the other side of the table. I agree that these vagabonds need a damned thrashing from our boys. When proper find a kick to put them down for good, replied Wallop, stamping his cane on the ground for emphasis. And a damn good thrashing they'll get, don't you worry. Domville stretched as he spoke, standing up and making his way over to the drinks cabinet to pour himself a glass of port. Whilst Wallop's news was good, there was still the concerning fact that he had even needed to hold this meeting at all. Domville remembered back in Bedford's day when the Lords would largely obey without question. The great mass of abstentions that always met their bills and made redundant by the lack of real opposition. But things had changed since then, not for the better. The pragmatists were getting bolder. It seemed that every bill saw a cluster of abstentions turn into votes against, leading to meetings like this, becoming a necessity. "Something the matter, Prime Minister?" Wallop asked as Donville turned to face him. No, nothing was the matter, he thought, shaking his head and tipping back the port with a slightly wobbling hand. All was well, the votes were assured. The problem of the loyalty of House of Lords could be handled some other time. Problems of yesterday consigned to tomorrow. Well, it's the end of the third part, and we've made it a month into this video, the game. We might be here a while, but I think there's supposed to be a good amount of content here, so we might need a good while. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there, but thank you as always for watching, my friends. If you like this video, leave a like. If not, feel free to dislike if you want to see more of this content featured. The sub button for uploads weekdays, as well as occasionally Saturdays. If you have any comments or feedback, leave in the comment section below. I read all the comments again and appreciate any all feedback you may have for me. Check out my various links down in the description box below, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.